Claire Mitchell had always loved the rain. Not the stormy kind, but the soft, steady drizzle that wrapped Seattle in a moody silence. That night, it danced gently on her apartment windows while jazz played low in the background. The couch cushions still held the warmth of Jason Hayes, her best friend for nearly a decade, a man who knew her better than most people ever tried to. He was stretched out there now, wearing his old hoodie, eyes half closed after a 12-hour hospital shift. Claire was in the kitchen, pouring him a glass of red wine like she always did. Our routine was familiar, comfortable, yet tonight everything felt just a little off. There was something in the way his eyes followed her, how her fingers, brushed his hand when she passed him the glass, how the silence between them wasn't awkward but heavy. Charged. Claire had been single for 4 months. Her last relationship with Aaron, a sharp-suited, emotionally distant lawyer, had ended not with fireworks, but with exhaustion. Too many cold dinners, too many empty apologies. Jason had picked up the pieces. Not in a dramatic, heroic way, but in small, honest ways. Listening, showing up, making her laugh again. But tonight, Claire didn't feel broken anymore. It felt curious, a little dangerous. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to see Jason in a different light. She stood in the doorway looking at him, really looking. The soft stubble on his jaw, the way his arm curled over the throw pillow, how his chest rose and fell steadily with his breath. There was a comfort in Jason's presence, but now it came wrapped in a subtle ache. Her heart beat a little faster. She wondered if he felt it too. He opened his eyes, catching her staring. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low and raspy from sleep. She nodded slowly. "Yeah, just tired." She moved closer, kneeling beside the couch. Their faces were inches apart now. He smiled, warm and tired. "Thanks for letting me crash here again. Anytime," she whispered. "Good night, J-Night, Claire." And then she leaned in. She told herself it would be just a goodnight kiss on the cheek, something sweet and harmless. But her lips hovered too long. Her heart pounded too loud. And when her mouth found his, it wasn't soft or accidental. It was hungry, hesitant, full of questions she didn't know how to ask. Jason froze for a moment. Then he kissed her back. The world shrank to the space between them, the warmth of his skin, the scent of his cologne, the taste of wine and wonder on his lips. When they finally pulled apart, breathing unsteady, the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was electric. Neither of them said a word. Claire stood slowly, unsure of what came next. But the look in Jason's eyes told her she wasn't alone in whatever. This was Dot. She turned toward her bedroom. "Sleep well," she said, her voice just above a whisper. Jason nodded, watching her disappear down the hallway. But no one slept well that night. Because when a friendship crosses a line, especially one built on years of comfort, heartbreak, and hidden longing, there's no going back, only forward into a future neither of them had dared to imagine. And in the soft, flickering shadows of Claire's apartment, something beautiful and terrifying had just begun. The morning after didn't feel like the movies. No soft music, no dreamy smiles. Instead, Claire sat on the edge of her bed, wrapped in silence, staring at herself in the mirror like she was trying to recognize the woman staring back. Her lips still felt warm from the kiss. Her skin remembered his touch. And somewhere deep inside her chest, something had started to stir, something old and familiar, yet terrifying. She had kissed Jason, her best friend. The man who had seen her ugly cry through breakups, who had driven across the city just to bring her soup when she had the flu, who had watched every season of Grey's Anatomy with her even though he hated it. And now she had kissed him, not just kissed him, melted into him, wanted more, taken more. That kiss last night had been slow but full of hunger, like two people who had held back for far too long. It wasn't some heat-of-the-moment mistake. It was real. She walked out into the living room, heart racing. Jason was already up, standing by the kitchen counter, pouring 2 mugs of coffee like he always did. His hair was messy, his hoodie half-zipped, and he looked up at her like he wasn't sure if he should smile or apologize. "Morning," he said, voice low, like he was still waiting for her to say it had all been a dream. "Morning, Claire," answered, trying to sound casual but feeling anything but. They stood there in the small kitchen, feet apart but hearts tangled. Jason reached for her coffee mug, held it out, then hesitated. "About last night?" he started. Claire's stomach flipped. She hated how fast her brain was spinning, wondering if he regretted it. If he'd call it a mistake, if this was the part where they laughed it off and went back to normal. But there was no going back. Not after the way he'd kissed her like she was the only thing that mattered. She took the mug gently from his hand, her fingers brushing his. "You didn't cross any lines," she said quietly. "I kissed you. First, remember." Jason let out a breath, smiling for the first time that morning. "I do remember," he said. "But I didn't stop you either." They both laughed, a little awkward, a little relieved. But then the silence settled again, deeper this time. Claire looked down into her coffee, her voice softer now. "So what does this mean?" Jason leaned back against the counter, rubbing the back of his neck like he was trying to find the right words. "It means we either just ruined the best friendship we've ever had, or we found something we've been afraid to admit for years." Claire's eyes met his, and for a moment it all hung there between them. Years of unspoken feelings, shared secrets, quiet nights, and the kind of love that had always existed just beneath the surface. The kind that sneaks up on you slowly, till one night it finally breaks through. She didn't know what scared her more, the idea of losing him or the thought of falling completely. Because falling in love with your best friend wasn't a fantasy. It was messy, risky, and real. It wasn't just passion, it was trust, history, and all the little things that made love feel terrifyingly permanent. And as they stood in the quiet morning light, hearts wide open but afraid to move, both Claire and Jason knew this wasn't just about one kiss. It was about everything they were finally ready to feel. Asterisk for the next 3 weeks. Claire and Jason became something undefined. Not just friends, not quite lovers, but caught somewhere in between. They didn't talk about that night, not out loud. But it was there, in every glance, every long pause, every quiet breath between them. They still hung out like always, movie nights, late dinners, lazy Saturdays filled with music and wine. But now their touches lingered a second longer. Their hugs held warmth they hadn't dared express before. And their eyes met with a new kind of hunger. Claire didn't know how to explain it. She wasn't the kind of woman to fall easily. Anymore, love had become something she tiptoed around, not because she didn't believe in it, but because she knew how quickly it could fade, how deep it could cut. With Jason, it felt safe, but also dangerous in a completely different way. This wasn't some new guy with fresh promises. This was Jason, the man who knew her favorite takeout spot, who had been to her mother's house for Christmas, who had seen her heart shattered more than once. He wasn't a stranger. That made it beautiful and terrifying. They kissed again and again. It always happened late at night, in the quiet hours when the world felt softer. A shared blanket on the couch, a hand sliding along her thigh. Look that said more than words ever could. They never rushed it. But it wasn't just physical. There was something deeper, more grown-up. They talked in whispers about regrets, childhood wounds, failed relationships, and dreams they never said out loud before. Claire learned things she never knew, even after all these years, about his fears, his guilt, and the way he carried the world's weight without letting anyone see it. He made her feel seen in a way she hadn't in years. But with every kiss, every intimate touch, something else began to grow inside her. Doubt. Because this, whatever this was, didn't come with labels. And the more she fell into him, the more she feared losing everything. What if they ruined it? What if he didn't want more? She wanted to ask, but the words never came. Meanwhile, Jason carried a quiet storm of his own. He had loved Claire from afar for years, buried those feelings under friendship, fear, and timing that never worked. Now that it was finally happening, he was scared to death he'd mess it up. So instead of pushing forward, he held back. He told himself it was too soon, that Claire needed time, that this slow, secret rhythm they'd found was enough for now. But he had a secret, something heavy, something Claire didn't know. He had almost told her a few nights ago. They were wrapped in her sheets, her head resting on his chest, her fingers tracing lazy circles against his skin. He whispered, "There's something I need to tell you." But she was half asleep, and her soft "tell me tomorrow" felt like permission to stay silent. And so he did. He didn't tell her about the woman he once loved, the child he had, the marriage that ended in quiet regret. Jason wasn't hiding a double life, but he was hiding a past that still lived in him, one that might change everything. And while Claire dreamed of what they could become, Jason was silently praying that the truth wouldn't break her. Because some love stories don't fall apart from lack of passion. They break under the weight of what wasn't said. It was supposed to be a lazy Sunday. Claire had just stepped out of the shower, towel wrapped around her, coffee brewing in the kitchen. The light was soft, and the world felt calm. One of those rare mornings where everything felt like it was finally falling into place. She and Jason had spent the night wrapped in each other, whispering between kisses, laughing under the sheets like teenagers who had no idea what heartbreak even felt like. She was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was real. That love could grow slowly, even from friendship. That Jason wasn't just her comfort, he was becoming her future. Then came the knock on the door, sharp, sudden, uninvited. Claire opened it, still smiling until she saw the woman standing there, blonde, mid-30s, calm but guarded, and holding a toddler on her hip. "Hi," the woman said, her voice steady but quiet. "I'm Lauren. I think you know Jason Hayes." The name hit Claire like cold water. Her breath caught. "Yes, I do. I'm his ex-wife." The words echoed in Claire's chest, louder than they were spoken. Her eyes dropped to the child, a little boy with Jason's eyes. Jason had never mentioned a child, not once. The rest was a blur, a few polite words, an awkward silence, the sound of Lauren's boots walking away down the hallway. Claire stood frozen in the doorway, the truth crashing down on her like a wave. A wife, a kid, a past he never shared. And he had looked her in the eyes, held her in bed, kissed her with honesty, while carrying a secret big enough to break them both. When Jason showed up that evening, the storm on Claire's face said everything. "She came here," Claire said, voice flat. "Lauren, with your son." Jason stood still, guilt written all over his face. "I was going to tell you," he said. I didn't know how." Claire shook her head, hurt slicing through her like glass. "You had weeks, Jason. I laid in your arms. I told you things I've never said out loud. And you couldn't give me the truth?" "It wasn't about hiding you," he said quickly. "It's shame. I left them. I couldn't make it work. I failed as a husband, and for a long time as a father. I didn't want you to see me that way." His voice cracked, but Claire was already drowning in doubt. All those nights they'd spent together, did he hesitate because of this? Was she falling for someone who still had one foot in the past? "I'm not mad that you had a life before me," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm mad that you let me believe I knew all of you." Jason reached out to her, eyes full of something real. Regret, fear, love. But Claire stepped back. Her chest was tight, heart torn, because the betrayal wasn't in the secret, it was in the silence. And love, no matter how tender, can't survive when the truth isn't part of it. That night, Claire didn't cry, not right away. She just sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket that still smelled like him, wondering if love was always this complicated, wondering if you could trust someone completely and still feels so incredibly alone. Asterisk days passed, but Jason didn't call. Not because he didn't care, because he did. Maybe too much. But sometimes silence feels safer than facing someone. You've hurt, and Jason had always struggled with that kind of bravery. Meanwhile, Claire tried to go back to normal, but nothing about life felt normal anymore. Her apartment was too quiet. Her coffee tasted dull. Even her favorite playlist sounded off, like every love song had turned into a lie. She missed him, not just the way he touched her, but the way he looked at her when she spoke. Like she was the only thing that mattered. But every time she thought about that knock on the door, about the woman, the child, the truth, Jason kept buried. It wasn't that he had a past. It was that he didn't trust her enough to share it, and love without. Truth is just a beautiful lie waiting to break you. Claire started writing in her journal again, something she hadn't done since her last real heartbreak. She poured her pain onto paper, writing letters she never planned to send. "You made me feel safe," she wrote one night. "And that's why it hurts so much. Because I trusted you to bring your whole self into this with me, not just the parts you thought I'd accept." She read that line back and closed the book, tears hot in her eyes. But deep down, she wasn't angry anymore. She was just sad, 'cause what they had, even if it was unfinished, had been real. She felt it in the way her chest ached when she thought about his laugh, his scent, his quiet strength. Jason hadn't meant to hurt her. He was just a man afraid of being seen too clearly. And maybe she was a woman who expected too much too soon. Then, one rainy evening, not unlike the night they first kissed, her doorbell rang again. Claire hesitated, her heart skipped. She opened the door slowly. And there he was, Jason, soaked from the rain, holding a small paper bag of her favorite Thai food and a copy of the book she'd once mentioned she loved as a teenager. His eyes searched hers. "I should have told you everything from the start," he said, his voice raw. "But I didn't want you to see me as broken. I wanted to be perfect for you, and that's where I went wrong. Because love doesn't want perfect, it wants real." Claire didn't say anything right away. She was staring at him, trying to decide if her heart could take the risk again. "Do you still love her?" she asked quietly. Jason shook his head. "No, but I'll always respect her. We were just two people who couldn't grow in the same direction. And our son, he's the one good thing that came out of it. I want you to meet him someday when you're ready. But not as my friend, as someone I love." That word, love, sat heavy in the space between them. Claire stepped back, letting him in without a word. They didn't kiss, not yet. But when she closed the door and sat down beside him on the couch, her hand found his. And for now, that was enough. 'Cause sometimes love is about forgiveness. Sometimes it's about showing up even after you've messed up. And sometimes it's about finding your way back, slowly, quietly, one honest truth at a time. Asterisk, it didn't happen all at once. The healing, the rebuilding, there were still quiet moments of doubt. Moments Claire would catch herself looking at Jason and wonder, what else don't I know? But then he'd reach for her hand or touch her lower back the way he always did when they walked into a room. And she'd remember love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up. Jason did just that. He showed up, not with flowers or big speeches, but with presence. He made her feel like a priority, not a secret. He invited her to dinner with his son, not to test her, but to share his world. And when Claire met little Eli, wide-eyed, curious, so much like Jason, her heart softened. She saw not a man with baggage, but a man with depth, who had lived, lost, and was still choosing love anyway. Their relationship shifted into something deeper, no longer wrapped in fantasy, but grounded in truth. They had real talks about trust, fears, long-term plans. Claire confessed that part of her still worried he might leave the hard stuff out again. Jason didn't promise perfection. He promised honesty. "I won't always get it right," he said one night, pulling her close in the dark. "But I will always tell you when I get it wrong." That was enough. because Claire wasn't looking for a fairy tale anymore. She was looking for something real, even if it came with scars. One night, weeks later, they drove upstate for a weekend getaway, just the two of them. Small cabin, a fireplace, and nowhere to be. The air was crisp, and the leaves were just starting to turn. That evening, wrapped in a blanket on the back porch, Claire leaned into Jason and whispered good night. But her lips didn't stop there. She kissed him slow with purpose, not with the heat of new passion, but with the weight of everything they'd survived. His hand slid gently into her hair, and for a long moment, they said everything without saying a word. That night, they made love, not rushed, not explosive, but tender and connected. It wasn't about lust. It was about choosing each other fully. Afterwards, they lay in silence, her head on his chest, their bodies tangled under soft sheets. "I was scared," she said. "Scared of losing what we had as friends. Scared of not being enough." Jason kissed the top of her head. "You've always been enough. I was the one hiding." Claire smiled, eyes wet with tears she didn't try to hide. In that moment, she realized something important. Real love isn't the spark. It's what happens after the fire dies down. It's the part where you stay, and Jason had stayed. So had she. Love didn't look like a movie. It looked like slow mornings, hard conversations, shared pain, soft kisses, and choosing each other again and again, even when it would be easier to walk away. As the first light of dawn slipped through the curtains, Claire turned to Jason and whispered, "I don't want to be afraid anymore." He reached for her hand, laced his fingers through hers, and said, "Then let's stop being afraid together." And in that quiet cabin, wrapped in the arms of a man who once carried a secret, Claire found something better than a fairy tale. She found love that stayed,